Hello, this is Andrew, and I'm here with Bettie Bloodshed.
Yep.
And gonna interview her on her cosplay hobby. So let's get this going. So, what would you say was your most memorable convention you went to?
Probably New York Comic Con last year in 2012. It kind of was the con. I've been going to conventions and doing cosplay for about 7 or 8 years at this point, but that's the con that kind of really started getting me a lot more serious about the craft. And I ended up with a lot of press at that convention and had a lot of opportunities that kind of fell into my lap, and it's kind of snowballed from there. So that's kind of the biggest con that was probably the biggest con experience I've had. MTV Geek ended up doing a big article on me, and basically, well, not on me specifically, but basically about cosplay and stuff, and kind of followed me around con for the weekend to show kind of what a con is like for the regular cosplayer. And then I also, because of one of the costumes I was doing, was able to meet the cast of the character I was dressed up as. So that was really positive, and I had a really big blast with that. So
what did it feel like to have a camera follow you around the con for?
Luckily, it wasn't like I did do a couple interviews for MTV, but luckily, mostly it was like a journalistic piece. So I didn't have the big cameras following me around, things like that. But actually having someone popping by and taking pictures of me on the floor, interacting with fans and other cosplayers and stuff like that was kind of interesting, and it was really cool, and I really enjoyed the experience.
Okay, so you had this opportunity. Have you had any other? Is it sort of a step up for you? Because I'm sure you've had other media do it, but MTV is kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah. I've had a couple, ING, a couple of just basic comic sites have done things. Back when G4 actually did stuff at Comic-Con, I actually was in a piece for them last year. Sadly, it was during their live bit, and I never found a copy of it. Though I do have confirmation that I existed on television for a short period of time. So that was really cool. I do have I ended up, because of my cosplaying and stuff, I have gotten in a lot of contact with the creators of the comics and the characters that I dress up as. I actually talked to Kelly Sue Donovan, the woman who writes Captain Marvel, and I've never gotten to meet her, and I'm hoping to go to Emerald City Con next year and actually finally get to meet her. So that's my big thing right now, is to get out to see Kelly Sue.
Is that something that she does exclusively? She does Emerald City Comic-Con?
She goes to Emerald City Con, Heroes Con, which is in North Carolina or South Carolina, and then and now I know and she's also going to some con in England, because my friends are going to get to meet her. But she has 2 kids with Matt Frackton, and since their kids are pretty young, she's decided to kind of back out of doing cons so much. So there are very few cons that fans can actually go and meet her at, which is a bummer for us, but I understand why she does it. So
which con was it that you were, the New York one? Was it New York Comic Con?
Yeah.
And so what was the most, besides the cameras getting your glory shots of you in your costume, what was the most memorable part of that con for you?
Okay, so this is gonna totally out me, but I'm a really big fan of the TV show Teen Wolf on MTV. A really big fan of it. And there was a small group of us who had dressed up like characters from the show, and they had never, apparently the people who create create Teen Wolf had never actually seen Teen Wolf cosplayers before. And because of that, they actually got us upstairs to meet the lead actor of the show and the creator of the show and the guy who produces it. So mainly because I was with my friends, and that was a huge deal. That was really, really exciting for me. I'm embarrassed about it, but it was really, really awesome.
What was kind of the first cosplay you saw that made you think, man, I really want to do that?
I actually started doing costumes back in high school. My first, I guess you could consider it a cosplay, but it was just a Halloween costume I had made with my mother, was Sailor Jupiter from Sailor Moon. But I just made that to go out trick-or-treating with the kids I babysit. But it was obviously much more detailed than any normal Halloween costume. I went to college in Arkansas. We don't really have any cons in Arkansas or like Memphis area. So it wasn't really until I moved to DC that I actually like found the like a true con scene, because I went to my friends started going to Otakon, and I was like, oh, what's this Otakon thing? Oh, they dress up in costumes. Okay, let's go. Like, and so the first year I went, like I had 3 costumes, and I, you know, totally went into that. And I've always been really big into like costumes and movies and like the whole like visual look of that kind of thing. So I really just kind of got into it like that. And I started out mostly with, you know, like anime characters and things from video games, and I've slowly branched out back into comics and stuff. When I also like, especially like girls my age, like we grew up with Sailor Moon, and so that's very much like our childhood and us desperately wanting to be magical girls. But then, you know, and it wasn't until recently I would really say that comic books have really come into the forefront again. Back in the early 90s, when I was really into comics, like they were incredibly popular, but there was that huge drought between, I'd say, about 96 and 2004 that like nobody was doing anything with comics. Like Marvel and DC were like having real problems. All the, you know, comic movies sucked. And it really wasn't until like Iron Man came out and there was a real resurgence and good writing and comics and stuff.
Well, I mean, everybody hates on 90s comics movies, but I gotta say that Spawn was pretty awesome for...
Yeah.
That's McLaren.
And that's...
Yeah.
And it's stylistically very different and not something that a lot of people, I think, would necessarily go for. A lot of people don't even think of... Yeah. I don't think if you asked, like, the regular person on the street, they'd even know that Spawn was a comic book. It's kind of like people don't even know that Constantine was a comic book.
Yeah.
So,
and I didn't know until I was like, oh, it's a comic book. Cool.
Yeah. Completely different from the movie, but...
Yeah, that's what I hear.
So, yeah.
Well, you know, they say the book isn't always the same as the movie, so...
Yeah.
It must follow for comics.
Yeah. And that's the amazing thing about Marvel, is that they've really been able to, even though the stories are different, they've been able to adhere to the spirit of what the comics are about. And I think that's why Marvel's kind of winning the war when it comes to, you know, popularity and things like that. And you know, and I'll admit, I really only dress up like Marvel characters. I have like one DC character that I dress up as, and the rest of them are all Marvel. So I'm a Marvel fangirl.
So you have this, you have a pretty awesome Tron cosplay. How did you come on to that? Was it off of the original movie or was it off of the reboot?
Okay, so I am a huge Tron fan. Like, I've been a Tron fan since I was a little kid. The movie came out a few years before I was born, but my mom was really into it, and so I kind of grew up with Tron. And I saw Tron Legacy. I'm in theaters like 7 times. Like, I was... because there were certain scenes I really wanted to watch again and again, and I didn't have a camera, so because that's illegal, and I can't. And I work for the government, so I do not do illegal things. But yeah, and so I really fell in love with it. And while I liked the character Cora in it, I really kind of fell in love with Jem, the siren that is in it, is played by Bo Garrett. And pretty much from the first moment I saw it, I was like, I'm making that costume. I started working on it on my own. I started having some real problems with it. The fabric was pretty hard to work with. Luckily, one of my friends is an incredible seamstress and helped me work with it and did the majority of the work, I'll admit. She took what I did and perfected it and made it what it is today. We were going to put in lights, but it was going to be very difficult with the way that her suit is made. So right now it's just reflective tape. And any of the shots are Photoshop with the actual like glowy bits. But it was about a year and a half to 2 years in the making. I worked on bleaching my hair for about a year and a half to get it to the correct color, because you can't wear a wig with her hairstyle. So like I committed to that role and was working towards that role for about a year and a half.
I mean, some cosplayers do 2, 3, 4, 5 outfits, and it's pretty spectacular to be kind of that devoted to one costume, to focus in on something like that.
Yeah. And I've hence retired it. I'm not going to be wearing it probably for a good long time. I wore it to quite a few cons, but I was really tired of having bleach blonde hair So I'm done with that for a while. And it's also it's probably the most exhausting costume I have ever worn in my entire life. It is a struggle to walk in it. It is a struggle to stand up straight in it. And that's actually accurate to what the actress had to go through wearing it. So I guess I should be proud of that. I actually couldn't sit down in normal chairs. I had to carry around a little like cane chair that I could like kind of straddle and lean on to sit because that suit is so tight. So retiring it was kind of a good thing.
A lot of cosplayers wear cat suits because, I mean, a lot of comic creators draw cat suits. Well, how do you deal with that personally, and how do you keep cool in something that's so skin tight?
You don't. I will admit, in gym, I am not. If I need to go to the bathroom, I am not going to the bathroom until I am done with the con. I don't drink. I don't eat in that suit because I can't get out of that suit. I'm like hooked into it through the shoes. I don't get out of that suit until I'm done with con. Some of my other suits, like Captain Marvel, is much easier to get in and out of, and that suit's actually pretty comfortable, and I can get in and out of that pretty easily. I mean, the main thing is, like, if there's air conditioning, I stay in air conditioning. If it's really hot outside, like, I try to avoid really, really hot cons. Back at Otakon, which is in Baltimore, the temperatures a couple times were about like 96 degrees with about 80% humidity, and I was wearing a Team Fortress 2 Pyro costume. And if you're not aware, Pyro wears a big jumpsuit, but we were doing like a girly version of it, so I was wearing a skin-tight latex bodysuit. I thought I was going to die. I was chugging water, and I was miserable, and it was disgusting when I took it off. It was just so sweaty, and I have never worn that costume again. So I pretty much try to avoid, if I can, anything that's going to make me that miserable. Gym is the only one that I ever wore that I couldn't get out of pretty easily.
So you also did a very good Captain Marvel. Tell me about what made you pick that version of her and why.
Carol Danvers is probably my favorite comic book character of all time. I've been a big fan of her ever since I was a young kid. One of probably the first comic book cosplay I ever picked up was Miss Marvel, back when she was, still in the Lightning Bolt. And I've just always been, really impressed with how strong of a character she is, and there are very few, I think, good, strong role models as characters in the female comic book world. At least, even in her like leotard, at least like she was completely covered up to, she wasn't all cleavage, and depending on who drew her, she didn't wear heels, and she was wearing a relatively modest leotard depending on who drew her. But the minute I found out that she was going to become Captain Marvel, and she was getting this practical jumpsuit that's not overly tight, that she actually looks like something that a normal male superhero would wear with flat boots and all that stuff, I took the first picture of it and started working on it, and I never looked back. Like, it's probably my most iconic costume and the one I'm known for the most besides my gem, and I've since retired it until Emerald City Con, but I love it, and I'm so glad that I'm known for that costume.